That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The salt air hung heavy over Naval Station Norfolk, carrying the faint tang of diesel and rust from the docks. It was 0530 hours, and the pre-dawn light filtered through the chain-link fences, casting long shadows across the concrete aprons where the K9 unit assembled. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention beside her partner, Rex, a 7-year-old Belgian Malinois with a coat the color of weathered sand. Her uniform, crisp camouflage blouse tucked into trousers, boots polished to a dull shine, mirrored the precision of the unit around her. The other handlers, all male except for her, formed a loose semicircle near the edge of Pier 14, their dogs leashed at heel, ears pricked to the distant hum of a supply ship maneuvering in the harbor. "Unit, attention!" barked Staff Sergeant Harlan, the K9 detachment commander. His voice cut through the quiet like a knife, echoing off the metal bulkheads of the warehouses. Feet shuffled into place, heels clicking against the damp pavement. Elena felt the familiar pull in her shoulders, the weight of her gear, radio clipped to her belt, notepad in her pocket, and the subtle pressure of Rex's lead in her gloved hand. At 34, she'd been with the unit for 8 years, rising through the ranks on deployments to the Middle East and training rotations in the Pacific. Rex had been her shadow since his puppy days, certified in explosives detection and now specialized in hazardous materials. Their bond was unspoken, forged in the repetition of commands and the shared rhythm of patrols. Harlan paced the line, his eyes scanning each handler and canine pair. This morning's exercise, perimeter sweep simulation, dockside integrity check. We rotate through the piers, focusing on concealed hazards. Standard protocol, no deviations. Vasquez, you're on point with Rex for the initial run. Affirmative, Sergeant, Elena replied, her tone even, betraying none of the unease twisting in her gut. Rex shifted beside her, his flanks rising and falling a touch too rapidly. He'd been off for days, refusing his full ration of kibble, his nose less eager during scent drills. The base vet had cleared him yesterday afternoon, attributing it to a minor gastrointestinal upset from the humid Virginia weather. But Elena knew better. Rex's eyes, usually sharp and alert, held a dullness she'd only seen once before, after a shrapnel graze in Afghanistan. Still, regs were clear. Operational readiness trumped minor ailments. She couldn't bench him without Harlan's sign-off, and requesting it would flag her judgment. The unit moved out in formation, boots thudding in unison as they approached the dock. The pier stretched into the Elizabeth River, lined with cargo containers stacked like silent sentinels, their surfaces scarred from years of saltwater exposure. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the low thrum of generators from the adjacent fuel depot. Elena unclipped Rex's lead partially, allowing him slack for the search pattern. "Such," she murmured, "the Dutch command for search." Rex nosed forward, his tail low but wagging faintly, paws padding softly against the weathered wood planks. The other handlers fanned out behind them, their dogs mirroring the motion. Controlled, methodical. Corporal Ruiz, a wiry handler with a fresh buzz cut, glanced her way. "Vasquez, you sure about bringing him out? Rex looks like he could use a day in the kennel. My boy Duke's been hacking up a lung from that pollen, and I left him behind." Eleanor kept her eyes on Rex, who paused to sniff a coil of mooring rope. Vet cleared him. He's fine for light duty. It wasn't the full truth, but doubt had no place in the field. She'd spent the night in the barracks, wiping down his paws after a late evening walk, feeling the heat radiating from his fur. Loyalty wasn't just protocol. It was the thread that held them together through the isolation of night watches and the isolation of command decisions. Harlan's voice crackled over the radio net. "All teams report contacts. Vasquez advanced to the underdock sector. Simulate chem-bio ingress points. Roger, Elena acknowledged, clipping the radio back. She guided Rex toward the ladder, descending to the shadowed space beneath the pier, where the water lapped darkly against pilings encrusted with barnacles. The air grew cooler here, thick with the scent of brine and decaying algae. Rex hesitated at the top rung, his ears flattening. Elena knelt, her knee brushing the slick metal. "Baymir," she whispered, "stay with me." He descended beside her, body tense but pressed on. Up on the pier, murmurs rippled through the unit. Private First Class Malone, the youngest handler, leaned toward Ruiz. "She's pushing it. My last dog got sick like that. Ended up with a twisted gut. Command's gonna chew her out if he folds mid-sweep." Ruiz shrugged, but his eyes lingered. "Vasquez is solid, but regs say sidelined for anything over 24 hours symptomatic. Harlan's already side-eyeing her." Elena ignored the chatter filtering down, focusing on Rex. He moved in a zigzag pattern across the gravel substrate, nose inches from the ground, pausing at irregular intervals. The space was a maze of supports and debris, discarded pallets, rusted chains, the occasional oil drum half buried in silt. Something felt off, though. The air carried a faint, acrid bite beneath the salt, like battery acid mixed with vinegar. Rex's head snapped up, then down again, his breathing labored but determined. "Contact!" Harlan's voice boomed from above, his silhouette blocking the light. "Negative so far," Elena called back, her hand steady on the lead. But Rex was zeroing in on a cluster of concrete footings near the waterline, where shadows pooled deepest. He whined softly, a sound she'd rarely heard from him, not alert, but distressed. She crouched closer, heart rate steady despite the knot in her chest. Protocol demanded she report anomalies, but pushing Rex now, in his condition, bordered on the line she'd sworn to walk, duty to the mission, or to the partner who'd saved her life twice. As the unit's eyes turned toward the underdock, the first wave of criticism broke. Harlan descended the ladder, his boots clanging. "Vasquez, stand down. Rex is off. Pull him back. We don't risk assets on questionable readiness." She met his gaze, the weight of the chain of command pressing like the humid air. "Sergeant, he's got a hit. Let him work." The morning's routine had cracked, and in that moment, beneath the dock's unforgiving shadow, Elena Vasquez chose conscience over immediate obedience. The unit watched, radios silent as Rex pressed forward, his nose burrowing into the gravel. What he uncovered would expose not just a hazard, but the fragility of trust in the ranks. The shadows under the dock thickened as Rex pawed at the gravel, his nails scraping against the compacted earth with a rhythmic insistence that echoed off the pilings. Elena knelt beside him, her gloved hand hovering near his collar, feeling the rapid flutter of his pulse beneath the leather. The air down here was stagnant, laced with that sharpening, acrid tang, now unmistakable, like the residue of a spilled solvent cutting through the brine. Above, the unit's boots shifted on the pier, murmurs filtering down like distant radio static. "Vasquez, I gave you a direct order," Harlan repeated, his voice low but edged with authority as he reached the gravel substrate. His flashlight beam sliced through the dimness, illuminating Rex's focused form. The sergeant's face was a mask of controlled frustration, jaw set under the brim of his cap. "Pull him, now! We rotate to a fresh team!" Elena straightened slowly, her eyes locked on Rex. He was digging deeper, body low to the ground, a low rumble building in his throat. Not aggression, but the alert she'd trained into him over countless hours in the scent-proof rooms of the K-9 facility. "Sergeant," he's indicating. "Strong response on hazmat. If we stop now, we compromise the sweep." Her words came measured, each one weighed against the regs etched into her mind. Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation. But Rex had never false alarmed, not in 8 years. Loyalty wasn't a chain, it was the invisible line between handler and K-9. tested in the quiet moments when commands blurred into instinct. Harlan stepped closer, gravel crunching under his boots. The other handlers peered from the ladder's edge, Ruiz with arms crossed, Malone's face pale in the half-light. Indicating or not, Vasquez, he's symptomatic. You brought him out against advisory. That's on you if he crashes. His tone carried the weight of the chain, the unspoken reminder that she'd been flagged in last quarter's readiness report for over-attachment to her asset. In the unit, dogs were tools, vital but expendable. Handlers who blurred that line invited scrutiny. Rex's whine sharpened, pulling Elena's attention back. He nosed aside a layer of silt, exposing a rusted seam in the concrete footing, a hairline crack, weeping a thin, oily sheen that caught the flashlight's glow. The smell intensified, biting at her nostrils, sulphurous, chemical, the kind that lingered on gear after a decon drill. Elena's training kicked in. She unclipped a sample kit from her belt, the plastic vial cool in her palm. "Rex, aus," she commanded softly, "out." He backed off, sitting on his haunches, tongue lolling but eyes fixed on the spot. She swabbed the seepage, sealing the vial with a click that seemed to amplify in the confined space. Harlan watched, his radio already in hand. "All teams, hold position. Potential environmental anomaly under Pier 14. Vasquez has a sample. Stand by for EOD relay." The words hung, a bridge between routine and incident. Up top, the unit stirred. Ruiz descended the ladder, his dog Duke straining at the lead. "What have you got? That smell's been here before. Thought it was runoff." "Doesn't smell like runoff," Elena said, rising to her feet. She handed the vial to Harlan, her movements precise despite the tremor she felt in her core. Not fear, but the quiet ache of knowing she'd crossed a threshold. Rex leaned against her leg, his warmth seeping through her trousers, a silent anchor amid the rising tension. The vet's words echoed, "Monitor, but operational if cleared." She'd chosen to trust her partner over the form, and now the eyes of the unit bore down. Malone's voice cut from above, edged with the rawness of youth. "If he's sick, this is reckless. Command's gonna pull her certification. I've seen it happen to a guy in Coronado." Ruiz shot him a look, but the doubt rippled outward, a subtle fracture in the formation. Harlan keyed his radio again, voice steady. "Base Command, K9 detachment reporting. Request hazmat team to coordinates 36, 85 north, 76, 30 west. K9 alert on subsurface leak. Sample en route." The response crackled back, terse. "Acknowledged. Quarantine sector. All personnel evacuate upper pier." Alarms would sound soon. The base shifting into protocol lockdown. Elena clipped Rex's lead short, guiding him toward the ladder. His steps were deliberate but weary, paws leaving faint prints in the gravel. As they ascended, the morning light broke fully over the harbor, gilding the water in gold. The unit reformed on the pier, dogs heeling tight, handlers exchanging glances that spoke volumes without words. Harlan pulled Elena aside near a stack of pallets, his expression unreadable. "You defied me down there. Explain." The question wasn't accusatory, yet, but the subtext was clear. Justify or face the report. She met his gaze, the salt wind tugging at her collar. "Sergeant, Rex's red is gold. Vetting him out would have missed this. He's not just an asset, he's the edge we need." It was the closest she'd come to pleading, but her voice held firm, rooted in the deployments where his nose had cleared routes through minefields, saving squads without fanfare. He nodded once, curt. "Sample confirms you might be right, but procedure exists for a reason. You're on report for the Defiance, pending review." The words landed like a formal reprimand, the first ripple in her file. Around them, the hazmat team arrived in a convoy of white vans, technicians in Tyvek suits spilling out with detectors humming. Ruiz approached, clapping a hand on her shoulder. Brief, respectful. "Good call, Vasquez. Duke wouldn't have picked that up half as clean." But Malone lingered at the periphery, radioing his log with a hesitation that Elena caught. Word would spread through the barracks by chow time, the handler who risked her dog, her rank, for a hunch. As the team cordoned the dock, Rex sat at her feet, head resting on his paws, the faint tremor in his frame a reminder of the cost. The chemical analysis would take hours, but already the incident report was forming, her name at the top, tied to the defiance that uncovered the leak. In the command tent later that morning, the air conditioner hummed against the rising heat, papers shuffling under Harlan's hands. Elena stood at ease, Rex curled in the corner on a blanket she'd brought from the kennel. The preliminary read from the lab tech: trace volatile organics, likely from an old fuel line breach beneath the pier, non-lethal in open air, but a slow seep that could contaminate the harbor if unchecked. You saved us a federal headache, Harlan admitted, signing off on the quarantine order. But the review board will want your side. That choice under the dock, it's not just about the dog. Elena nodded, her hand absently stroking Rex's ear. The moral weight settled deeper. Obedience preserved the chain, but conscience preserved the mission. As the unit dispersed for debrief, the base stirred with the quiet machinery of response. Divers prepping, engineers mapping the subsurface. Her act of trust had exposed the vulnerability not just in the dock, but in the ranks themselves, where loyalty to a partner could challenge the very orders that bound them. Hours stretched ahead, the leak's full scope unfolding, and with it the scrutiny that would test Elena's resolve like never before. The fluorescent lights in the command tent buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the folding tables cluttered with maps and glowing laptop screens. Elena stood with her hands clasped behind her back, the weight of Harlan's words lingering, like the chemical residue still faint on her gloves. Rex lay at her feet, his breathing steadier now but shallow, his flank rising and falling in the rhythm of exhaustion. The sergeant folded the incident report, his pen scratching final notes on the form, her name in bold, the defiance underlined in red ink. Debrief at 1400 hours. Full unit. Bring your log. He dismissed her with a nod, but his eyes held the scrutiny of a man who'd seen careers pivot on smaller infractions. Outside, the Virginia sun climbed higher, turning the harbor into a shimmering expanse of blue, edged with the white foam of distant wakes. The hazmat team worked methodically along the pier, their detectors beeping in staccato patterns as they traced the leak's perimeter. Elena led Rex back toward the K9 kennels, the gravel path crunching under her boots. The base hummed with midday activity, sailors in dungarees hauling lines, the distant clank of cargo cranes, the sharp bark of another unit's dog echoing from the training fields. But whispers followed her, subtle at first, then bolder as handlers from adjacent detachments paused in their routines. Ruiz caught up near the kennel gate, Duke trotting at his side with easy gait. Heard the prelims, that seeps from a 98 pipeline install. Corroded fittings nobody flagged, base engineering scrambling. His voice was low, respectful, but carried the undercurrent of unit solidarity tested. Harlan's putting you up for the review, though, says it's protocol. Eleanor unlocked the gate. The metal latch cool against her palm. Rex pushed through first, heading straight for his run with a weary shuffle. She filled his water bowl from the hose, the spray hissing against the concrete. Protocol saves the mission half the time. The other half, it blinds us. She watched Rex lap at the water, droplets catching the light on his muzzle. The vet's clearance replayed in her mind, a quick exam, a note in the file, operational. But she'd seen the signs, the subtle limp after yesterday's drill, the way he'd favored his left side during the descent. Bringing him out hadn't been defiance alone. It was faith in the bond that regs couldn't quantify. By afternoon, the murmurs had solidified into sidelong glances during the unit chow line. The mess hall smelled of boiled coffee and reheated MRE components, beans and rice, the staple that fueled endless shifts. Elena cued with her tray, Rex's absence a void at her heel. Malone sat with a cluster of privates at a corner table, his voice carrying just enough to reach her. Pushing a sick dog for glory, that's how you get pulled from rotation. My CO in basic benched a handler for less, dog keeled over mid-search. The words landed like shrapnel, not aimed, but piercing. Ruiz, seated nearby, shot Malone a warning look but said nothing, his fork pausing over his plate. Elena kept her expression neutral, loading her tray with the day's ration, a foil packet of chicken stew, crackers stamped with expiration dates. She chose a table by the window, overlooking the docks, where yellow caution tape now fluttered in the breeze. The criticism wasn't new. Female handlers in the unit faced it layered with doubt about toughness, about objectivity, but this felt personal, tied to Rex's labored breaths under the pier. The debrief convened in the operations hut at 1400 sharp, the air thick with the scent of dry erase markers and oiled rifles racked along the walls. Harlan stood at the head of the room, a projector humming behind him, casting grainy images of the dock's underbelly onto the screen. The unit filled the benches. 8 handlers, their dogs settled in crates outside, ears twitching at the muffled voices. Elena took her seat in the second row, notepad open, pen at the ready. "Incident summary," Harlan began, clicking to a photo of the cracked footing, the oily sheen magnified. Canine alert confirmed, trichloroethylene traces, industrial solvent from subsurface migration, non-acute, but exposure risk to harbor ops. Quarantine holds through end of week. Engineers diving tomorrow. Nods rippled through the room. Ruiz leaned forward, attentive. Harlan's gaze swept to Elena. Handler Vasquez's team initiated contact, sample secured despite operational variances. The pause hung, inviting the undercurrent to surface. Malone shifted, his boot tapping against the bench leg. "Sergeant, permission to speak?" The variances, Rex was symptomatic. Vet log shows advisory hold. Bringing him out risked the asset and the sweep. Harlan's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Noted, PFC. All inputs logged for review." Elena felt the room's focus shift. A collective breath held. She raised her hand, voice steady. "Sergeant, Rex's indication was clean. 0 false positives in his record. Symptoms were monitored, clearance obtained. Halting mid-search would have delayed confirmation by hours. It was factual, procedural, but the words carried her conviction. The dog's nose over human hesitation, loyalty over liability. Murmurs stirred, Ruiz's approving grunt, Malone's scoff, barely masked. Harlan clicked off the projector, the screen blanking to white. "Review board convenes 0800 tomorrow. Vasquez, you'll present. Unit stands down until then. No dock access." He dismissed them with a crisp salute. But the tension lingered as they filed out, dogs reclaiming their handlers with eager nudges. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted low, painting the asphalt in orange hues. Elena walked Rex from his crate, his leash loose in her hand. He moved slower now, pausing to sniff the chain-link fence, but his eyes met hers with that unwavering trust. Ruiz fell in step. "Malone's green talks big to cover nerves, but the board, they'll grill you on judgment." She nodded, the salt wind carrying the faint echo of alarms from the quarantine pier. "Judgment's what got us the alert, if that's the cost." Her voice trailed, the moral line sharpening. The criticism had gone public now, woven into the debrief, rippling toward the board where careers turned on testimony. As the unit dispersed to barracks, Elena felt the institution's machinery grind closer, investigation looming, her choice under the dock no longer private. Rex pressed against her leg, a quiet reminder that some bonds outlasted reports, even as the scrutiny threatened to unravel them. In the quiet of the kennel that evening, with the base lights flickering on against the dusk, Elena reviewed her log by flashlight, the pages rustling softly. The leak's discovery had averted disaster, but the Defiance had ignited a reckoning, one that would force the unit to confront not just her decision, but the fragile trust between human and canine in the shadow of command. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The review board chamber in the base's administrative wing felt like a vault, walls paneled in dark oak, the air conditioned to a crisp chill that raised faint gooseflesh on Elena's arms beneath her uniform. At 0755 hours, she entered alone, Rex secured in the adjacent holding area, with a kennel attendant monitoring his vitals. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing out the morning's harbor sounds. The low drone of tugs maneuvering cargo, the sharp calls of quartermasters directing traffic. Inside, 3 officers sat at a raised table. Major Ellis, the presiding judge-advocate, flanked by Captain Reyes from Base Engineering and Staff Sergeant Harlan, his expression neutral, but his posture rigid. "Master Sergeant Vasquez," Major Ellis began, his voice echoing slightly off the polished floor. He was a veteran of logistics commands, his file thick with deployments from Desert Storm onward. "Be seated. This is an informal inquiry under UCMJ Article 15, non-judicial. Your actions during the Pier 14 sweep are under review. State your account." Eleanor took the chair opposite, her boots planted flat, hands folded on her knees. The room smelled of fresh coffee from a side table and the faint, oiled scent of the American flag draped in the corner. She'd prepared overnight, replaying the sequence in her mind, the descent, Rex's alert, the sample vial in her palm. "Sir, at 0530 hours, K9 detachment initiated perimeter simulation. I was assigned point with Asset Rex, certified for hazmat detection. Symptoms noted pre-mission, minor lethargy per vet log 140923, but cleared for duty. During underdock sector, Rex indicated on subsurface anomaly. I secured sample despite order to stand down, confirming trichloroethylene migration." Ellis nodded, flipping through a binder stamped with red classification tabs. The sample validated the alert. Engineers report the leak stemmed from a degraded flange in the 1998 fuel manifold, potential for groundwater ingress. Quarantine averted escalation. His pen tapped the page, a measured rhythm. Yet Sergeant Harlan's directive was explicit. "Pull the asset." You proceeded. "Explain the rationale." Harlan shifted, his eyes meeting hers briefly. Colleague to subordinate, the chain unbroken even here. Eleanor drew a steady breath, the cool air steadying her. "Sir." Halting would have invalidated the sweep. Rex's indication was definitive. Tail drop, pawing, vocalization per training protocol. In 8 years, 0 false positives. Prioritizing the mission over immediate withdrawal, aligned with operational necessity. She paused, the words chosen carefully. No emotion, just facts. But beneath, the ache lingered. Rex's weary form after the ascent, the way he'd leaned into her touch in the kennel. Captain Reyes leaned forward, his uniform sleeves rolled, to reveal a faded tattoo from his CB days. Necessity or overreach? The asset was symptomatic. Elevated temperature logged at 101, 2 post-mission. Bringing him exposed the unit to liability if collapse occurred mid-operation. His tone was procedural, but the implication hung. Judgment impaired by attachment. Engineering reports projected the leak's scope, hundreds of gallons seeping annually, risking the Elizabeth River's ecosystem and base certifications. Her defiance had uncovered it, but at what cost to protocol? The Major's gaze sharpened. Witness statements from the detachment. PFC Malone cites recklessness. Corporal Ruiz endorses the call. Sergeant Harlan, your input? Harlan cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the quiet. "Ma'am, Vasquez is exemplary, top quals in the unit. But regs under AR 40905 mandate sidelining for health variances exceeding advisory. The Defiance set precedent. If unchecked, erodes command integrity. His words were balanced, but Elena caught the subtext. Protect the system, even if it meant her standing in the crosshairs. Ellis steepled his fingers. This isn't adjudication yet. Recommendations forward to the commander. Vasquez, your bond with the asset is noted in evals. Exceptional synergy. But the military demands obedience as the foundation. Does loyalty to a canine supersede chain of command? The question pierced, forcing Elena to confront the core. She thought of Rex's training, hours in simulated holds, his nose tracing faint vapors while she whispered encouragements in Dutch. No, sir. But in the field, the asset's capability informs the chain. Rex detected what detectors missed. Pulling him risked the harbor. Her voice remained even, but her mind flashed to the docks. The oily sheen, the wine in his throat. Loyalty wasn't rebellion. It was the quiet calculus of trust earned in silence. The board recessed for deliberation, Ellis dismissing her with a curt, "Stand by." Elena exited to the hallway, the fluorescent strips overhead buzzing like distant rotors. Outside the holding room, Rex pawed at the gate, his tail thumping once, a subdued greeting. The attendant nodded. "He's stable, ate half his ration. Vet's en route for follow-up." She knelt, gloved hand through the mesh, feeling the warmth of his muzzle. The bond pulsed there, unspoken. He'd pushed through for her, as she had for him. Word spread through the base like radio chatter, handlers in the motor pool pausing mid-conversation, sailors glancing from the chow line. By noon, the engineering dive confirmed the leak's extent. A corroded line snaking 30 feet into the silt, valves seized from neglect. Base Command issued a stand-down for Pier 14 ops, rerouting supply chains at a cost of thousands in overtime. Ruiz texted her from the field. "Board grilling hard? Units got your back." But Malone's doubt echoed in the whispers Elena overheard near the quartermasters. "Pushing a dog for the win? That's how you burn out." Harlan found her at the kennel an hour later, the sun beating down on the chain link, casting diamond patterns on the concrete. Rex dozed in his run, flanks steady now. Majors leaning caution, probable counseling, no stripe loss. But they'll mandate a handler K9 eval protocol review. His stance was at ease, but tension lined his shoulders. "You did right by the mission, Elena. Just next time, loop the chains sooner." She nodded, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. "Understood, Sergeant. Rex is the best read we've got." The words bridged the gap, a subtle affirmation amid the scrutiny. As he departed, the vet arrived. Dr. Patel, clipboard in hand, stethoscope dangling. Post-incident check. Temp normalizing, likely dehydration amplified the symptoms. He examined Rex methodically, the dog's tail wagging faintly under the probe. By evening, the board's preliminary findings circulated via secure memo. Inquiry sustained, but commendation for the detection attached. Elena reviewed it in her barracks, the single bulb casting shadows over her bunk. The public reckoning had peaked, the unit's eyes, the officers' questions, the institutional grind exposing every facet of her choice. Criticism lingered in Malone's averted gaze during evening formation, but Ruiz's nod carried weight. Rex's discovery had forced a deeper audit. Not just the dock, but the unit's readiness standards, where canine health intersected with human command. As night fell, the base quieted, the hum of generators fading, the harbor lapping softly against the pilings. Elena sat with Rex outside the kennel, his head in her lap, the stars pricking the humid sky. The leak's repair would take weeks, but her resolve hardened. Integrity wasn't defiance. It was the steady hand guiding the mission through doubt. The board had tested her, the unit watched, and in the balance, loyalty proved its quiet strength. Rippling outward, challenging the system to adapt or fracture. The first light of dawn filtered through the barracks blinds, painting stripes across Elena's bunk, where she'd finally collapsed after midnight. Rex's soft snores from the adjacent kennel had lulled her into uneasy sleep, but now the reveille horn blared, pulling her upright with the precision of habit. She dressed in silence, fresh uniform, boots laced tight, before clipping Rex's lead and heading to the morning formation. The air outside carried the chill of early autumn, mingled with the persistent brine from the harbour, where repair crews already hummed around the quarantined pier, their welders sparking like distant fireflies. Harlan assembled the unit at 600 on the apron near the kennels, the handlers falling into ranks with a crisp snap of heels. Dogs sat alert at their sides, tails still, sensing the undercurrent of tension that had thickened overnight. The preliminary memo had circulated by secure email. No formal charges yet, but a full tribunal scheduled for 1,000 hours in the main briefing hall. Eleanor took her place in the line, Rex pressing close, his nose nudging her knee as if to steady her. Harlan's gaze swept over them, lingering a beat longer on her. "Stand by for command brief. Dock ops remain locked down. Engineers confirm the manifold breach extends 20 meters. Hazmat's projecting 2 weeks minimum for containment." Murmurs rippled through the formation, subdued but charged. Ruiz stood 2 spots over, his expression a mask of solidarity, while Malone avoided eye contact, his dog's lead gripped tighter than necessary. The criticism from the debrief had fermented into something more tangible now, whispers in the head, sidelong glances during PT runs. Elena felt it like a weight in her chest, not resentment, but the quiet erosion of trust within the ranks. Rex shifted, his ears perking at a distant crane groan, oblivious to the human fractures, but attuned to her subtle tension. After formation, the unit dispersed to prep for the tribunal, but Elena was summoned early to Harlan's office. The space was utilitarian, metal desks scarred from years of use, a single window overlooking the motor pool where Humvees idled with low rumbles. Harlan sat behind the desk, a fresh stack of reports before him. "Vasquez, sit. The Major's expanded the panel. JAG reps from Norfolk HQ inbound. They'll want the full chain. Your log, vet records, witness depositions." He slid a folder across, her name tabbed in black. "Engineering's crediting the alert, prevented a potential spill into the river, fines in the 6 figures. But the Defiance angle, it's drawing eyes upward." She opened the folder, scanning the attached engineering schematic. The corroded line sketched in precise blue lines, branching like veins under the pier. "Understood, Sergeant. I'll present as logged." Her voice was level, but inside the moral calculus replayed, the moment under the dock when Rex's paw had broken the gravel, exposing the seep. Obedience would have preserved her record. Conscience had preserved the base. Harlan leaned back, the chair creaking. "Units divided. Ruiz backs you, says it's the kind of call that saves lives long term. Malone, he's vocal about protocol. Thinks it sets a bad example for the Greens." Elena nodded, closing the folder. "Protocol's the backbone, but Rex's red was the mission." She thought of the nights training him in the scent lanes, the way his focus never wavered, even as fatigue tugged at his edges. Leaving him benched would have been easier, safer for her stripe, but the bond demanded more. Harlan's radio crackled then, a terse summons from the XO. As she exited, the base stirred fuller. Sailors in coveralls hauling barriers to the pier, the sharp scent of welding flux cutting the air. The tribunal convened in the briefing hall at 1000, a cavernous room with tiered seating and a podium scarred from countless inquiries. The panel had grown, Major Ellis at center, now joined by Lieutenant Commander Hale from JAG, a sharp-eyed officer with a binder of precedents, and Captain Reyes, his engineering expertise anchoring the technical side. Witnesses filled the front rows: Harlan, Ruiz, Malone, and 2 techs from Hazmat, their Tyvek suits swapped for dress blues. Elena entered last, Rex at heel on a short lead, the dog's nails clicking softly on the linoleum. The room hushed, eyes tracking her path to the witness stand, a simple chair under harsh fluorescence that buzzed like interference on a comms line. "Master Sergeant Vasquez," Ellis intoned, gavel tapping once for order. "This proceeding reviews potential violation of UCMJ Article 92. Proceed with your testimony." Elena stood, hand on the Bible, her oath delivered in a clear voice that echoed off the walls. She recounted the morning, assembly at 5:30, Rex's pre-mission check, the descent into the underdock shadows. Asset indicated at grid 14B, subsurface. Sample secured at 6:12 hours. Order to stand down received at 6:08. Proceeded to confirm per operational imperative. Hale leaned forward, his questions probing like a drill. Imperative or insubordination? AR-190-14 mandates canine health protocols. Vet advisory noted lethargy. Why not defer? The room leaned in, the air thick with the faint odor of polished wood and stale coffee from the sideboard. Elena met his gaze. "Deferral risked delayed detection, sir. Rex's certification includes hazmat thresholds. His response aligned with Qualls." She described the alert in detail. The pawing, the whine, the acrid shift in the air. Her words painting the scene without flourish, just the raw sequence of command and instinct. Ruiz testified next, his posture straight as he approached the stand. "Vasquez's call was sound, ma'am. Duke ran sims on that sector last month. Negative. Rex nailed it because he's trained tight. Halting would have burned daylight." His support landed solid, a counterweight to Malone's turn. The private fidgeted under the lights, voice cracking slightly. "She knew he was off, brought him anyway. If he'd gone down, we'd lose the dog in the sweep. Protocol protects the team." The exchange built like a briefing escalation, each statement layering the moral tension. Reyes interjected with specs. The leak's pressure was low. Detectors might have missed it without the canine precision. But pushing an asset, it blurs lines. Harlan closed the witnesses, his summary balanced. Exemplary handler, but the chain must hold. Recommendation, formal counseling, enhanced health protocols unit-wide. As the panel deliberated in sidebar, whispers stirred among the observers, handlers from other detachments slipping in, drawn by the base grapevine. Eleanor sat with Rex at her side, his head resting on her boot, the warmth grounding her amid the scrutiny. The public nature amplified everything. Her choice no longer a shadow under the pier, but a case study in the hall's unforgiving light. Hale's voice cut through as they reconvened. Findings, infraction noted but mitigated by outcome. No reduction in rank, counseling and probationary eval for 6 months, commendation for detection to file. Relief flickered, subtle as a held breath, but the cost lingered. Ellis addressed the room. "This incident prompts review of K9 readiness directives. Vasquez's actions highlight synergies and risks in human K9 ops." The gavel fell, dismissing them. Outside, the midday sun beat down, the harbor's water glinting under a cloudless sky. Ruiz clapped her shoulder in the corridor. "Held the line, unit owes you." But Malone's parting glance carried the fracture. Doubt sown, not erased. Elena led Rex back to the kennels, the lead loose in her hand, his steps gaining vigor with the fresh air. The tribunal had reckoned publicly. The institution responding with measured justice, her integrity affirmed, yet bounded by the chain. Engineers' reports projected full repair by month's end, but the ripple extended, the base auditing all peers, protocols tightening on K9 deploys. In the quiet of the run, as Rex settled with a contented sigh, Elena felt the transformation stir, her stand not just personal, but a catalyst, urging quiet reform in the ranks where loyalty and command intersected. Word spread through the afternoon briefings, the unit absorbing the outcome like a new standing order. Harlan pulled her aside near the ops hut, the distant weld of repair crews punctuating his words. Probation means spot checks, vet evals bi-weekly, but the commendation, it'll carry weight come quals. She nodded. The probation a tether, but the legacy emerging. Her choice under the dock forcing the system to confront its blind spots, where a handler's conscience could safeguard more than protocol alone. As evening formation called, Rex at her heel, Elena walked taller. The moral tension resolved not in victory, but in the steady evolution of trust, rippling through the chain like the harbor's unceasing tide. The probationary haze settled over the K-9 detachment, like the morning fog rolling in from the Elizabeth River, muting the sharp edges of routine, but sharpening the eyes, watching Elena's every move. 2 weeks post-tribunal, the base had returned to operational tempo, piers reopening in phases. The welders' arcs, now faint memories replaced by the steady thump of cargo handlers securing lines. Elena clipped Rex's lead at 0500, his coat gleaming under the kennel lights after a regimen of rest and vet-prescribed supplements. His energy had rebounded, the lethargy faded, replaced by the crisp alert she'd known for years. But the bi-weekly evals loomed. Doctor. Patel's stethoscope, a constant reminder of the scrutiny etched into her file. Harlan's voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet during formation. Vasquez, you're on secondary sweep today. Pier 12, support role only. Ruiz takes point. The assignment was deliberate, a probationary leash, no solo runs, no underdock descents until the 6-month mark. Elena acknowledged with a crisp, "Roger," her posture unyielding as the unit moved out. Rex heeled tight, his nose twitching at the salt-laced breeze, carrying hints of fresh tar from the repair zones. The criticism had quieted in the barracks, Malone's barbs reduced to awkward silences during chow, but it lingered in the formal channels, a notation in the detachment's standing orders. Enhanced health protocols mandatory for all assets pre-deploy. The sweep unfolded methodically under a slate-grey sky, the pier's wooden planks slick from overnight dew. Ruiz and Duke led the zigzag pattern along the container stacks, their boots echoing in sync with the lapping water below. Elena followed at flank, Rex's paws padding softly. His ears forward but restrained, no full search command until cleared. The air hummed with radio chatter. Sector clear, negative contacts. She scanned the edges, her eyes tracing the new barriers installed post-incident, steel grates over vulnerable footings, sensors blinking green from recent calibrations. The leak's repair had cascaded into base-wide audits. Engineering teams had mapped every subsurface line from Norfolk to the shipyards, unearthing 3 more micro-breaches in adjacent piers. Her alert had sparked it, a quiet reform rippling through the infrastructure like aftershocks. Midway through, a tech from the audit crew approached, clipboard in hand, his coveralls smeared with silt. "Master Sergeant, your sample from 14 set the benchmark. We're cross-training detectors off K-9 thresholds now, false positives down 15%. His nod was professional, devoid of judgment, but it carried the weight of institutional acknowledgement. Elena returned it, her hand steady on Rex's lead. "Assets quals hold the edge. Glad it's integrating." Rex sat alert beside her, sensing the pause, his tail giving a single thump against the planking. The moment passed unremarked, but Ruiz caught her eye from ahead, a subtle salute in his glance, the unit's loyalty reknitting thread by thread. Back at the kennel by 0900, the eval team arrived unannounced. Dr. Patel with his kit, flanked by a JAG observer noting compliance for the probation log. Elena unclipped Rex, guiding him into the exam pen where the concrete floor gleamed from a fresh hose down. "Full check. Vitals, mobility, scent response," Patel directed, his voice clinical as he fitted the muzzle thermometer. Rex tolerated it with practiced patience, his flanks steady at 100. 8 degrees. The observer, a lieutenant with a fresh academy polish, jotted notes on a tablet, her questions probing. Post-incident, any residual effects? Handler logs show increased monitoring, impact on deploy readiness. Elena stood at parade rest, the pen's chain link cool under her fingers. Monitoring enhances readiness, ma'am. Rex's recovery confirms it. Full quals resumed last week. She described the drills, controlled searches in the scent lanes, his nose locking on simulant vapors without hesitation. Patel completed the neurological sweep, flashing a light in Rex's eyes, the beam reflecting off pupils, sharp and dilated. Clear, no deficits. The lieutenant nodded, tapping final entries. Commendable. This feeds into the directive review. Your case is cited in the draft for updated AR 190-14 Annex on K9 welfare. As they departed, the weight lifted fractionally, but Elena knew the reform was broader. Word from Harlan, Base Command had greenlit a pilot program, Handler K9 synergy training, mandatory for all units, drawing from her tribunal testimony. It wasn't fanfare, no medals pinned under the flagpole's shadow. Instead, it emerged in quiet shifts, vet consults looped into pre-mission briefs, health thresholds formalized beyond advisory notes. Ruiz joined her at the fence post eval, Duke sniffing idly at the gravel. Heard about the annex, your Stan's rewriting the book. Malone's even running extra health checks on his boy now. She allowed a faint smile, the first in weeks, as Rex leaned into her leg, his warmth a steady pulse, not rewriting, just filling the gaps. The afternoon brought a unit-wide brief in the ops hut. The air conditioner whirring against the building humidity. Harlan projected the draft directive, slides detailing protocols, bi-weekly eval standard, defiance clauses clarified with mission exception clauses. This stems from Pier 14, he stated, his gaze sweeping the room. Vasquez's input shaped the welfare section. Questions? Malone raised a hand, his voice steadier than before. Sergeant, does this mean more downtime for assets? Impacts rotation. Harlan fielded it evenly. Balances risk and reliability. Saves the mission long-term. No direct challenge to Elena, but the shift was palpable. The criticism evolving into reluctant acceptance, the unit absorbing the lesson like a new formation drill. By dusk, as the sun dipped behind the warehouses, casting long shadows over the aprons, Eleanor walked Rex along the perimeter path. The harbor lights flickered on, buoys bobbing in the tide. Engineers' final reports confirmed the pier's integrity, seals holding, no seepage. Her probation stretched ahead, a disciplined path of spot checks and logs, but the redemption unfolded in the ripples, mentors like Ruiz guiding the greens on bond limits, Harlan incorporating her evals into training rotations. Rex's nose lifted to the breeze, catching the clean salt without the old acrid bite, his steps sure beside her. In the barracks that night, with the distant hum of generators lulling the base to rest, Elena reviewed the directive draft by her bunk light. The cost of integrity, scrutiny, probation had forged something enduring, a system tempered by conscience, where loyalty to a partner echoed through the chain. Rex's soft whine from the adjacent run pulled her to the door, her hand extending through the mesh. The moral tension had eased, not vanished, but transformed into legacy. The quiet strength of one handler's choice, mentoring the ranks toward justice beyond orders. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The months blurred into a disciplined cadence for the K9 detachment, the probationary rhythm embedding itself like a new standing order etched into the base's concrete foundations. Elena Vasquez moved through her rotations with measured precision, her boots tracing familiar paths from kennels to piers. Rex at her heel, his recovery complete, the faint scars of that morning under Pier 14 hidden beneath his sleek coat. The bi-weekly evals had become routine. Dr. Patel's stethoscope pressing against Rex's flanks in the exam pen, the JAG Observer's tablet glowing with compliance notes under the harsh kennel fluorescence. No incidents, no variances, just the quiet affirmation of protocols, now fortified by the directive's annex, her testimony woven into its clauses like reinforcing steel. Harlan called the unit to the ops hut one crisp November morning, the air sharp with the scent of impending frost mingling with diesel from the idling supply trucks beyond the chain link. The handlers assembled in formation, dogs sitting alert on the gravel apron, their breaths visible in faint puffs. Directive 190-14 update, Harlan announced, his voice carrying over the low hum of a distant helicopter warming up on the helipad. He projected the revised manual onto the screen inside, the room's projector whirring softly. Annex B, Canine Health Integration in Operational Readiness. Mandatory pre-deploy health thresholds, vitals, mobility, scent calibration, mission exception protocols clarified for handler discretion, logged and reviewed quarterly. Eyes turned to Elena, subtle but unmistakable. The acknowledgement that her stand had reshaped the framework. Ruiz stood at her flank, Duke's tail thumping once against the ground in echo of the sentiment. Even Malone, his posture less rigid now after weeks of running the enhanced checks on his own dog, offered a nod during the brief. The criticism that had crackled through the debriefs and barracks whispers had dissipated, transmuted into practical application. Handlers consulting vets mid-rotation, logs cross-referenced before dawn formations. The unit's cohesion had strengthened, not through fanfare, but through the procedural grind. Fewer sidelined assets, sharper sweeps, the chain of command adapting to the human element it's so often overlooked. Elena took her assigned rotation that afternoon on Pier 10, the wood planks creaking under the weight of recent reinforcements, the harbor's water slate grey under a low sky. Rex moved with renewed vigor, his nose weaving through the scent patterns she'd laid in training drills, the Dutch commands rolling off her tongue like breaths, such Voran. No underdock descents today. Probation held her to surface patrols, but the sensors installed post-audit blinked steadily green, a testament to the reforms her alert had ignited. Engineers had audited every inch of the waterfront, sealing microfractures in fuel lines that predated her arrival, averting spills that could have rippled into regulatory shutdowns and multi-million-dollar overhauls. Base Command credited the K9 unit in their quarterly report, a line buried in the logistics summary. Enhanced protocols prevented latent hazards. As the sweep concluded, Ruiz joined her at the pier's edge, the two handlers leaning against a rusted railing while their dogs lapped from portable bowls. The wind carried the faint tang of welders from the ongoing retrofits, a reminder of the leak's legacy. "Pilot programs rolling out fleet-wide," he said, his voice low amid the gulls' cries. "Norfolk to San Diego, handlers briefing on synergy evals. Your name's in the intro materials. Anonymized, but there." He clipped Duke's lead, the metal snap crisp. Malone's mentoring the new privates now, runs them through health logs like it's PT. Eleanor watched Rex shake off water droplets, his ears pricking at a passing patrol boat's wake, slapping the pilings. It's not about names, it's the edge it gives us, trusting the bond without breaking the line. The words settled between them, the moral tension of that defiant morning now a foundation stone. Her probation ticked toward its end, 3 months remaining, but the transformation had already taken root. She wasn't just a handler anymore, but a quiet symbol in the ranks, her choice cited in training modules as the balance point between obedience and operational instinct. The unit's evening formation brought the full arc into view. Harlan dismissed them early for a rare stand-down, directing them to the mess hall where a low-key recognition waited, not medals or ceremonies, but a simple briefing on the directive's impact. Inside, the air smelled of fresh brewed coffee and the faint steam from serving trays. The long tables lined with handlers and their canine partners settled underfoot. Major Ellis made a brief appearance, his uniform crisp against the utilitarian backdrop. "The Pier 14 incident," he stated, his gaze sweeping the room, "exemplified moral courage within structure. Reforms implemented have elevated readiness across commands. Master Sergeant Vasquez, your integrity contributed directly." The room stirred with restrained nods, no applause, just the solid weight of respect earned in silence. Elena stood at attention, Rex's warmth against her boot a grounding force. Harlan followed with unit assignments, integrating the new protocols seamlessly. Ruiz on lead for the next rotation, Elena mentoring the incoming handlers on health integration. Malone approached her afterward in the corridor, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows on the linoleum. "Didn't get it at first," he admitted, his voice gruff but sincere. "Pushing through like that sets the standard. My boy's clearer on sweeps now." It was reconciliation, subtle as a past salute, the fracture mended through shared drills and the directive's mandates. By week's end, Elena led her first mentorship session in the training fields, the grass damp underfoot from an overnight mist, the scent lanes marked with white chalk lines snaking toward the fence. 3 new handlers, 2 privates and a corporal fresh from Fort Benning, watched as she demonstrated the eval sequence with Rex, vitals check mobility circuit, scent lock on a concealed simulant vial buried in the soil. "The bond informs the command," she explained, her tone even, mission-focused. "Log everything, symptoms, responses. When doubt hits, weigh the mission against the asset." Rex indicated cleanly, pawing the earth with precision, his tail low and steady. The trainees noted it down, their notepads rustling in the breeze. Absorbing the lesson born from her reckoning. As probation concluded in the quiet of a December dawn, Harlan signed off in his office, the pen scratching across the form under the desk lamp's glow. Clean slate, full rotation restored. He extended a hand, the grip firm. "You've set a legacy here. Reform without the noise." Elena returned to the kennels, clipping Rex's lead for their first unrestricted patrol. The base stirred around them, boots thudding in formation, radios crackling with coordinates, the harbor's timeless lap against the docks. Her choice had rippled outward, sparking audits, directives, mentorships. A system evolved, learning to honor the conscience that safeguarded it. In the end, Elena Vasquez became more than a handler. She embodied the unyielding loyalty that bridged duty and heart, ensuring the ranks endured stronger, one disciplined step at a time. Under the vast sky over Naval Station Norfolk, where salt winds whispered through the chain link and the tide carried echoes of unseen hazards, discipline proved the truest legacy, binding human resolve to canine instinct in the quiet pursuit of justice. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of They Criticized Her for Bringing the Dog Sick. Hours later, he uncovered a chemical leak beneath the dock. See you in the next one.